When I moved into apartment 2A, I told myself it was just for the winter, a temporary place, a holding cell for my mind until I could think clearly again. The building was old, not in a charming way. Beige walls stained with memory, stairwells that creaked even when no one walked them, and doors that didn't quite shut all the way. But it was quiet, and that's all I needed. Quiet and anonymity. The superintendent, an older man with a fading neck tattoo and a smoker's rasp, handed me the keys with a warning. "Neighbors keep to themselves here," he said. "Most like it that way." I nodded. So do I. The first day was uneventful. I carried my boxes in alone. No one peeked through doors, no welcome baskets or curious knocks. That suited me. I didn't come here to be noticed. My name is Clara. I used to be a writer. Well, I suppose I still am. Once you've published a novel, no one really lets you stop being one. Even if your second book tanks and your publisher stops returning your calls, even if the only thing you've written in the past 7 months is a therapy journal full of sentences that trail off mid-thought. So yes, I was a writer, in hiding. From critics, from myself, and from the memory of the last conversation I had with someone I loved. The apartment was small, a kitchen just wide enough to stand in, a single window overlooking the alley, a living room with a radiator that never stopped clanking, but it had a desk. That was enough. The first night, I unpacked essentials, my typewriter, 2 worn notebooks, and a box labeled Past Lives that I shoved to the back of the closet. I told myself I'd open it later. I never would. Rain tapped the windows like it was trying to be let in. The building moaned in the wind, and somewhere above me, a floorboard creaked every few minutes. Not pacing, just adjusting, like the building itself breathed. I didn't notice the note until morning. I was groggy, barefoot, dragging myself to the kitchen when I spotted a piece of paper on the floor near the door, folded, lined, no envelope. At first, I thought it had dropped from one of my boxes, but it was fresh, no creases, no stains. I picked it up and unfolded it. One sentence, neat handwriting, slightly slanted. "You will skip dinner and pretend not to be lonely." I blinked at it, unsure what to feel. A joke? A prank from the superintendent? A weird welcome from a neighbor? Then I remembered I hadn't eaten the night before. I'd poured a glass of wine, read a few pages of a book I couldn't focus on, then stared at the ceiling until sleep took me. No dinner, no phone calls, just silence and a dull ache in my chest I hadn't named. I dropped the note on the table and ignored it for the rest of the day. That night, I tried to cook something. Simple, pasta. I even lit a candle, some pathetic attempt at reclaiming domesticity. But I lost my appetite halfway through boiling the water. Sat on the couch instead, wine in hand, scrolling through news I didn't care about, pretending that was enough. I fell asleep there. In the morning, I stepped on the second note. You'll avoid the mirror and pretend you don't miss your mother. This one cut deeper. My mother had died a year ago. Sudden heart attack. I hadn't cried at the funeral. I stood next to my brother and felt nothing. At least, that's what I told the grief counselor. But every night since, I avoided the mirror in the hallway, the one that used to sit in her home, the one I couldn't throw away. I walked past it with my head down, like eye contact might awaken something I wasn't ready for. I sat on the floor with the note for a long time, holding it like it might give up a secret. I even checked the hallway. Nothing, no footsteps, no neighbor doors ajar. Who was writing these? How did they know? Why me? That night, I dreamed of knocking. A slow, persistent knock echoing in the hallway. When I opened the door in the dream, there was no one there, only a mirror leaning against the far wall, reflecting something behind me I couldn't see. I woke to the sound of my radiator clicking. And another note. Tomorrow, you'll write one sentence and erase it 6 times. Don't bother with the 7th. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, but I sat at my desk, typed a sentence, erased it 6 times. I didn't bother with the 7th. I stopped pretending it was a coincidence by the end of the first week. The notes kept coming, always early morning, slid under my door as if by invisible hands. Never more than a single line. Always right. They didn't just predict my actions, they knew me. The me I didn't show anyone. The version that replayed conversations in the shower, that cried during toothpaste commercials, that pretended productivity when, in reality, I hadn't been able to write for days. Monday. You'll check your ex's profile and feel relieved he's not happy. Then you'll hate yourself for it. Tuesday. You'll try to write about a woman who isn't you. You'll fail. Wednesday. You'll stare out the window and wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared. They weren't just notes. They were dissections. Someone was peeling my mind apart, one layer at a time, and pinning the pieces to paper. I tried to stop reading them. The next one just said, "Nice try." It felt personal now, like I was being watched, studied. The hallway had no cameras, no mail slots, and I had yet to see a single neighbor. It was like I lived in a building that existed in a pocket between realities, a place where people used to live, but no longer did. Or maybe they watched me from behind peepholes, silent and still, wondering how long it would take for me to break. I started placing objects against the door at night, shoes, a stack of books, once even a frying pan. Every morning, the object would be moved just enough to slide the note through, never toppled, never loud, as if the air itself had made space for the paper. I taped a line of flour across the hallway floor. I stayed up all night watching from the peephole. Nothing. At dawn, I blinked. A second, maybe 2. When I looked again, the line was untouched, and the note was inside. You blinked. I turned obsessive. I stopped working, stopped showering. My apartment became a nest of papers, notes scattered on every surface, pinned to the wall with thumbtacks, arranged like a detective's web of clues. I cross-referenced them, looked for patterns, repeated words, dates, hidden codes. But the only thing I found was me. Every ugly thought, every truth I never said aloud, every moment I tried to forget. It was all there, chronologically documented by someone or something who knew me better than I knew myself. On Thursday, I wrote back, "Who are you?" I slipped the note under my own door before bed, heart pounding like a child playing a game they don't understand. The next morning, the reply was waiting. You already know. That day, I knocked on the door of apartment 2B. I'd passed it every day. The door was plain. No mat, no wreath, no shoes left out, no sound behind it, no signs of life. I stood there for a while before knocking, soft, then louder. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. The hallway felt colder than usual, like it had sunk into the marrow of my bones. I backed away, slowly. The lights above me flickered once, then held steady. When I returned to my apartment, there was a note already waiting. I hadn't heard it come. You shouldn't have knocked. My hands shook. My stomach twisted with something between fear and anticipation. I stayed up that night, staring at my ceiling. I could hear the radiator clinking, and underneath it, something softer, a pattern of sounds like fingers on keys, slow, steady, familiar. A typewriter. I wasn't using mine. I moved to the wall and pressed my ear to it. The sound was faint, but there, rhythmic, deliberate. I slept on the couch, fully dressed. In the morning, another note. Stop listening. She doesn't like to be overheard. It wasn't just my neighbor anymore. I was beginning to feel like the building itself was alive. that I was inside some kind of dream, a loop, like maybe I never left the place I'd been before, that somehow grief had built this building around me, and whoever wrote the notes had been waiting. That night, I dreamed of mirrors, hundreds of them. Each one showed a version of me, one smiling, one crying, one staring with hollow eyes, one typing furiously, one watching from behind glass. I reached for the one that looked the happiest. My fingers passed through. I woke up gasping. A new note lay on my chest. You only get one life. Choose carefully which version you become. I couldn't stay away from the door to 2B. It was nothing special, just another beige slab of wood with a tarnished brass number screwed slightly askew at the top. There was no noise behind it, no mail outside, no shoes, no signs of life, just stillness, the kind that seeped into your bones. But something in me buzzed every time I passed it, like a faint electric charge, like I was walking past a secret that knew my name. On Friday night, after another note that simply read, "You'll start searching even though you won't like what you find," I finally gave in. I waited until after midnight. The hallway was silent, thick with the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts louder than you'd like. I crept barefoot to the door and pressed my ear to it. Nothing. No typing, no movement, just silence. I knocked once. It echoed louder than it should have, or maybe it just felt that way. No answer. I pressed my hand against the door, half expecting to feel warmth or cold, but it was neutral, impersonal. Just as I turned to go, I heard something. A soft click, like a lock. I froze. Then I noticed the door was slightly ajar. It hadn't been before. I didn't open it, not then. I just stared, heart pounding, waiting for something, anything to explain it. A shadow, a whisper, a trick of the light. But there was nothing. I returned to my apartment, locked the door, and shoved a chair under the knob. When I checked the pee-hole an hour later, the door to 2B was closed again. Saturday morning, I awoke to two things. First, a note that read, "She left it open for you." And second, a memory I didn't recognize. I was standing in a long hallway filled with mirrors. Not like the dream. This felt real. The mirrors didn't reflect me as I was. They reflected versions of me I hadn't become. One was wearing a wedding dress. Another was older, her face lined and hard. Another was laughing, surrounded by people I didn't know. Each version felt eerily possible. And at the end of the hallway, a door. Apartment 2B. I shook it off, poured black coffee, and stared at the door across the hall through the pee-hole. It was like trying to see through a veil. The hallway distorted just slightly, like heat rising off pavement. By Sunday evening, I couldn't hold back. I went to 2B and knocked again. No answer. I turned the handle. It opened. Inside, the air was still, heavy, like no one had moved through it in years. There was no furniture, no rugs, no sign of human habitation, except for one thing: a mirror, full length, standing upright against the far wall, the only object in the room. At first, I didn't move, just stood there, blinking. The mirror was clean, not dusty, and yet no footprints led to or from it. I stepped closer, and what I saw didn't make sense. It showed my apartment from behind me, from across the hallway, from an angle I couldn't physically see from here. In the mirror, I saw myself, sitting at my desk, typing, but I wasn't typing now. I looked down. My hands were empty. In the mirror, my reflection smiled. I stepped closer, trembling. The reflection lifted a hand, waved. Behind her, in the background of my apartment's reflection, stood someone else. A woman, tall, with hair like mine, only longer, wearing a red sweater I didn't own. She stared at the back of my mirror self. Then she turned her head slowly and looked straight at me. Her mouth moved, forming a word I couldn't hear, but I knew it. Run. I bolted. I left the door to 2B wide open. I locked mine, double-locked it. I sat in the middle of the living room floor, gasping. Then I saw it. Another note resting on my desk. I hadn't heard it arrive. You saw it. You always do, but you never listen. I didn't sleep that night. I just watched the mirror in my hallway, waiting for my reflection to blink first. I didn't leave the apartment the next day. Couldn't. The mirror had lodged itself into my thoughts like a splinter beneath skin. I kept trying to think of explanations, optical tricks, hallucinations, some elaborate prank, but none fit. I'd seen myself in that glass, not just a reflection, a version of me, doing things I hadn't done, wearing clothes I didn't own, smiling in ways I didn't remember how to. And the woman behind her, that doppelganger, I couldn't stop seeing her face or hearing the words she mouthed, run. I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I taped every crack around my door, covered the hallway mirror in a sheet, and unplugged my typewriter, as if that might stop whatever this was, as if I could make the watcher lose interest by pretending not to notice. That night, I left every light on. The television blared white noise. I paced. At 3:16 a.m., another note appeared. She's inside now. I ran to the door. Nothing. No one. No sounds. I checked every closet, every corner. The apartment was empty, except for me, and the growing sense that maybe that wasn't true anymore. By dawn, I was breaking. Paranoia and insomnia began to blur the edges of my reality. I wasn't sure what day it was, how long I'd been in the apartment, if I'd eaten. The notes changed. They stopped predicting. They started instructing. Put on the red sweater. Sit at the desk. Write what she wrote. I didn't own a red sweater, but the next time I opened the closet, it was there, folded, warm. I put it on. I sat at the desk. I opened a blank page. Typed, "She's inside now." The typewriter clicked like it was glad to be alive again. I watched the mirror in my hallway for hours, but it didn't show anything unusual. No movement, no false reflections, no strange woman. Until nightfall. Then, my reflection blinked before I did. I froze. She tilted her head, not quite like me. Slower, sharper. I lifted my hand. She waved first. I ran to 2B. The door opened for me like it had been expecting me. The mirror was still there, but this time the apartment around it was different. It wasn't empty anymore. There was a chair in the corner, a table, a single lit candle, and on the wall above the mirror, someone had scratched a sentence into the plaster with something sharp. This is the version that stayed. I stepped in front of the mirror. Now I saw her clearly. The other Clara, the one in the red sweater. She was smiling wider now, writing. Behind her, the woman with long black hair stood closer than before, close enough to touch her, watching her like a guardian or a jailer. The woman lifted her hand and pointed, not at her Clara, at me. I turned. There was no one behind me, but when I turned back to the mirror, the other Clara was gone, and the woman was standing alone, now staring straight at me. She pressed her palm to the glass. A second later, my mirror fogged up, from the inside. I ran again, back to my apartment, but the door had changed. The number now read 2B. I checked the hallway. The opposite door, where 2B had always been, now said 2A. Had I flipped? Had the building? I rushed into my unit, hyperventilating. The walls looked the same, the furniture, the smell. But something was wrong, off by a few degrees, like a memory recalled too many times. Another note was waiting on the desk. She saw you too. And beneath it, keep writing or she'll come in fully. I wrote until morning. I didn't know what I was writing. It wasn't a story, not mine anyway. The words just came, not pushed. Scenes I didn't remember living, thoughts I didn't recognize, names I'd never said aloud. But they spilled from my fingers like they were being pulled, not pushed. In the mirror, the other Clara was back, watching me now, smiling, writing too. Behind her, the woman stood still, waiting. The mirror in my hallway became the centerpiece of my life. Covered or not, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I felt like it was watching even when I wasn't looking, breathing even when the air was still. And then, one night, it changed. Not the frame, not the surface, the reflection. I passed by half asleep around 2 a.m. en route to the kitchen, and in the mirror, I saw my apartment as usual, except it wasn't night in there. It was daylight. My body froze. In the reflection, everything was bathed in sun. Books stacked, coffee steaming, a woman humming. Her, the version of me with the red sweater. She was dancing. I stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wild animal. She turned, saw me, and smiled. Not maliciously, not warmly either. It was a smile with no temperature. Then she began writing. I glanced at my desk. My journal was open, blank. But as I stared at her hand moving across the page in the mirror, words began appearing in mine, line by line. The boundaries are softening. What was one way is now both. My knees gave. I collapsed to the floor, breathing hard. The journal snapped shut on its own. I tried to call someone, a friend, an ex, anyone, but my phone refused to connect. Each number rang once, then cut to silence, or worse, echoed my own voice back, whispering things I hadn't said aloud in years. You were always going to end up alone. I unplugged it, hid it in the freezer. I stared at the mirror again, still daylight inside, still her. I wrote a note. Why are you doing this? I held it up. She read it. Then she wrote back, in my reflection only, because you left. I returned to 2B. Couldn't help it. It called me like a forgotten home. The door was open. It always was now. Inside, more changes. Furniture had appeared. Not modern, but faded things. Mismatched chairs, a tea set, a coat rack with a red scarf I swore I once owned and lost. The mirror was gone. In its place, a window. It looked into my apartment. Not a mirror anymore, a portal. And through it, I saw myself, typing, laughing on the phone, living. Except I wasn't doing any of those things. I was standing in 2B, watching, which meant that version of me had taken over. I tried to scream, pound on the window, but the glass wouldn't break, the sound wouldn't carry. She looked up, saw me, raised a glass in a mock toast, and just before the window fogged over, she mouthed, "You should have stayed." Back in my own space, if it could still be called mine, I found the lights flickering. My reflection moved before I did. Notes now appeared everywhere, on mirrors, inside books, in the fridge. You're not the original. You've been living on borrowed time. She's reclaiming what was hers. I burned them, but they returned. She returned. More and more, I saw her in the glass, wearing my clothes, my skin. But behind her eyes, there was something else, something deeper, older. The woman with the long black hair sometimes appeared behind her, sometimes not. Once, she looked directly into me, not the mirror, me, and whispered, "Soon." I stopped counting the days. Time lost shape. Mornings bled into nights, and I began sleeping during daylight just to avoid seeing her. The red-sweatered version of me, the one who danced, wrote, laughed with strangers, had taken over my apartment. Or maybe she always had it. Maybe I was the intruder. I rarely left the building. I barely ate. The grocery deliveries came in brown bags with no receipts. My phone no longer rang. My laptop refused to power on. My notebooks filled themselves overnight. Each one scrawled with scenes I never wrote, stories I didn't remember living, names, dates, conversations, entire lives. One journal was labeled Clara 1A, another Clara 2B. The rest were blank, waiting. One night, I caught her watching me. I stood at the mirror in the hallway, my hand gripping the frame like a lifeline. In the reflection, the apartment behind me was empty, but in the reflection's mirror, the one inside the mirror, I saw her. She was watching me now. Like something had flipped, like I had become the image, and she the observer. I spoke for the first time in days. My voice cracked like brittle wood. "Who are you?" She smiled, then mouthed, "I'm the one who stayed." I fell backward, heart pounding. The lights in the apartment blew out in a cascade, one by one. Pop, pop, pop. Darkness. I lit candles. Shadows danced across the walls like memories. Notes had stopped appearing. I thought that would bring relief, but it didn't. The silence felt worse. I returned to 2B. The apartment was full now, lived in, familiar, almost comforting. I saw photos on the wall. Me, smiling, arms around people I didn't know. Birthday parties, beach trips, a graduation. None of those memories belonged to me. And yet, I could name every person in the photos. I remembered the speeches, the smell of the cake, the sand in my shoes. My hands trembled. Had I been split? Was I a copy? Was she the real Clara? Or had she stolen my life? The mirror in 2B shimmered again. Not glass, not water, something in between. She stepped through. The red sweater, the longer hair, the confident posture. She walked right past me, didn't even look, into the hallway, into my apartment. I chased after her, but when I stepped through the mirror, I didn't exit into the hallway. I exited into the mirror version of my apartment, the one I'd been watching. Only it wasn't a mirror anymore. It was my world now, and she taken the one I left behind. I banged on the glass, screamed, pleaded, begged. She stood on the other side, smiling. Her hands moved quickly across a typewriter. I watched my old body, my old life, become words on a page. She looked up and whispered, "We don't get to leave twice." Then she turned away. The mirror sealed behind her, and I was left inside. One of many, one of countless Claras, pressed between pages, trapped behind glass. Somewhere far behind me, in this mirror world, I could hear the clack of typewriter keys. Dozens of them, hundreds, all writing different versions of the same story, all trying to remember who they were before they stayed too long. I looked at my hands. They began to fade. Ink, not skin. Someone else had begun writing me, and they didn't plan to stop. The end. Subscribe to GNDR Studio for more psychological thrillers and identity mysteries.